Thinking about playing Warhammer 40K, but overwhelmed by the idea of spending $500, $1,000, or even $2,000 just to get started?
Surely you've thought to yourself, there must be a better way.
Well, today we're sharing some tips to help you start playing Warhammer 40K without breaking the bank.
In the warp's dark, twisty lanes where reality's a haze, there's a space marine named Stan, passing a wartime craze. With Bolter at his side and armor shining bright, he's got his Inwarp Mag to read by warp light. Oh, Stan's green Inwarp Mag.
Welcome back to another edition of Inwarp Mag. I am Brooke, joined as always by my co-host Drew.
Hey everybody, how's it going?
And today we're going to be talking about how to get into Warhammer 40K on a budget.
Yeah, so let's not bury the lead anymore and let's get right into it. So our very first thing, and this might surprise some of you, is don't play Warhammer 40K first. Play Kill Team first. Is this shocking to you too, Brooke?
Yeah, I mean, when you brought it up when we were talking about this, it's not exactly what I expected. It is 40K theme and setting and all that. Not exactly where I thought we would be for our first topic.
Yeah, it sounds like really bad advice starting off, but hear me out. So we've talked about this in our last episode that a lot of the actual hobby is painting and working on your minis. And my thought with playing kill team first is most of the kill teams are, your infantry or battle line units. And it's a good entry point because you're going to be spending most of your time in the hobby working on other similar battle line or infantry units. So this is a cheap way to test what faction you want to get into. So like say you haven't picked a faction out, this is a good way to get started with that. Say you've looked at AdMech and you're like, I know AdMech are a little more expensive, but I really like the idea of AdMech. And then you start painting AdMech and you're assembling them and they got those little spindly bits and you're painting them and you're like, oh my gosh, this sucks to paint. Well, you can learn that by spending maybe like $38 instead of spending $2,000 to build an entire AdMech army.
Are you speaking from experience on that?
Yes. Because I did
Yeah.
buy the Hunter Clade. I bought a couple boxes to do Hunter Clade, and I like AdMech, but I don't like AdMech that much. And I didn't break the bank by doing that.
Yeah, if you buy into Kill Team, if you buy a first of all, it's one good way to try a bunch of different factions in terms of kind of gameplay stuff. Kill Team is obviously not the same as 40K, but they still try to hold the similar themes of how they play in Kill Team as opposed to 40K. It's a little different, obviously, just because it's a different game system. But you can try, maybe you want to try Sisters, and you try Sisters, and you're like, I don't really like them. And then you try Tau, and you're like, oh, actually, Tau are pretty cool. Then you start to understand what you like out of a war game, which is maybe I want to be like shooting at distance, playing a ranged army, or maybe I want to play a melee army, get up close and get in people's faces. And then if you start on Kill Team and say you buy that first box and you don't enjoy playing a war game, you're only out $50.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not gonna be down several $100s after buying something bigger than this. It's a great place to start.
Yeah, but don't judge the experience of playing Kill Team for what 40K is going to be like because it's just so very different as far as activation order and stuff like that. I like Warhammer way better than Kill Team. So if you've played Kill Team and you're thinking about getting into Warhammer 40K, maybe you're sick of Kill Team or something like that. Warhammer 40K is very refreshing after playing alternating activation style war games.
Yeah, and you know, I like both. I think currently 40K is kind of the new craze, and I enjoy it right now a
For
lot
us.
more. Yeah, it's the new thing for us, and 40K being that I'm excited to play it. So I've not played Kill Team in a little bit, but I still really enjoy Kill Team. They're so different that you can play both and be happy with it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a great place to start. It's a good place to just try a war game and see if you enjoy that before you go in any further.
Yeah, and then one last thing, like the best part of it once you find a faction that you really enjoy and you bought them in Kill Team, the best part is you have your first unit painted and ready for your
Right.
army for 40K, and that army's probably, or that unit's probably going to be relevant to your army too. It's not going to be like a waste of money where you're like, oh, I bought Pathfinders, I'm never going to use these in Tau.
Right.
You're probably going to use them in Tau at some point.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move to the next one. You want to introduce the next one, Brooke?
Yeah, so I think the next one is kind of similar to playing Kill Team, but if you really want to get into 40K right away, you want to start small. And the best way to do that is to go and buy a box of a starter army, and that could be a combat patrol or some other of the like the starter boxes that are available for the current edition. There's the holiday boxes, and those are a little bit more expensive. Then there's the Battle Force boxes, which again are a little bit more expensive. But if you buy a combo box like that, some of them are better deals than others, but that's a great place to get a kind of quote unquote balanced version of an army where you kind of get some infantry and you might get a focus piece and you get a character and you kind of get the ball rolling. And do your research when you look at combat patrols and other starter boxes and see what the best deals are. There are better deals than others in those combat patrols. Definitely do your research before you buy into any of those. But if you want to get into 40K right away, buy one of those. And in combat patrols in particular,
yeah,
those
I agree.
those boxes in particular, you can play combat patrol game mode in 40K. It's its own game mode. You buy a box and that's your list. And you can play small 40K right away. It has its own like balanced data sheets for combat patrol that it's quote unquote balanced, not balanced. It's sort of not super balanced in that game mode, but it's a way that you can get started.
Yeah.
So,
and it's better to figure out sooner rather than later if it's not the game for you. So if you can play combat patrol, again, like if the balance of the game, I don't know how well balanced combat patrol currently is, but if the balance is off, then that's one thing. But if you just do not like the mechanics of the game, it's better to figure it out sooner rather than later. And you've only invested like $130. I think that's about what you can get a combat patrol for in on Amazon right now. But yeah, this is kind of like, it's like Kill Team Light or Kill Team. It's Warhammer Light basically. You're buying a bundle. It'll get you started right away.
And playing right away, importantly.
And boarding patrol, we just had the rules released for boarding patrol for 10th, like the new revised rules. So that might be a thing here soon. Maybe we're gonna get some new boarding patrol boxes for each faction. That would be cool.
And if you played Kill Team and you played the Into the Dark rule set, and you have 2 of those boxes, you already have the terrain that you will need for boarding actions, which is kind of a great transition off of Kill Team to 40K. Or you can go and, set up the walls with random, kids' toys. And I've seen people use like kids' toys and all this other stuff, but like you can use random stuff to build those
tiles.
walls.
Yeah.
Yeah. And stuff like that to kind of do the same type of thing. But that is also another starting point with boarding actions. And then you have obviously the combat patrol game mode itself that you can do. But starting small, starting with a combo box, that is a good deal. Instead of buying all those things individually, buy something that's a good deal to start and build from there.
Yeah, and I mean the primary point that we really haven't said is just the fact with these combo boxes is you're saving off of the MSRP. If you bought all these boxes, and it's common sense, if you bought all these boxes individually, you're going to be paying more money. Right. So if you found a faction that you really like and you want to get started in it, usually these bundles are going to be introducing you to units that are going to be like staples in your army. So you're not hurting yourself by buying one of these boxes, and there's plenty of YouTube videos where they're talking about the value of different combo boxes. Watch those. See if you like a certain faction. See if your faction's combat patrol is worth purchasing, or if maybe you should buy the boarding patrol instead. So like go look at those resources. We're not going to dive in that
we don't
far.
have any right now. At least,
yeah.
If you want us to cover that, if you want us to go over kind of the boxes and the value that each holds, we're happy to do that. Just let us know. Leave a comment if you want to see something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm notoriously cheap, so like if I see that I could get the boarding patrol, like I wanted to get the commandos at some point. I wanted Flash Gits and Boss Snickrot, and I wanted Beast Snagaboys. So the boarding patrol for orcs was perfect for me because it came with those units exactly. And if I bought all those individually, it would have cost me like another $100+. So you definitely save a lot of money, and you're getting units that you're going to use in your army.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that leads us on to another good opportunity to get models, and for cheap, less than MSRP, and that's going secondhand.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple options, or I guess I have 3 options here. So the first option I'll recommend definitely because I've personally used it. Go to your local hobby store and check if they have used models that you can buy. This could also be like conventions. They also have people that set up like booths, and they have used models that you can, they might be already painted, and you can go buy some used models for a lot less than MSRP.
Mm-hmm.
This was actually something I did when we first got into Kill Team. I bought some already painted models of units that I wanted to try and Kill Team, and I went to a store and I got like a full 10 man of Necrons that were all painted for like, I don't know, like $35, and it was like, oh, this is a great deal. Like the box itself is like $50, so may as well take advantage of that. And they were the new sculpts; they weren't even the old sculpts. That's a great option.
Yeah, and like you said, like we've gone to a local gaming store that sells secondhand models, and it's a great, if you aren't into painting personally, you can actually save money by buying secondhand, where you don't have to buy all the hobby supplies yourself. And that's a factor that I feel like a lot of people, they don't take that into account at all, having to buy the glue, having to buy a hobby knife, some clips to cut everything out of the sprues, your brushes, your paints. It gets really expensive. Especially if you don't like that aspect of the hobby, you can buy secondhand. It's a little more work, I would say, to find good models secondhand, because you're kind of stuck with what you got unless you're willing to, maybe repaint stuff. And that's where you want to find secondhand stuff that looks good,
Yeah, and repainting stuff isn't a huge deal. If you're starting out, you're new, it's not a huge deal. You can strip paint fairly easily. It's not that hard. It takes a little bit of work, but you can still strip paint if you don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go to a local store, there's one that I went to with some of my friends, and they had it was almost a full AdMech army that somebody had recently traded in for something, and it was all painted and it was all uniform. And it was available for a pretty decent price. For if I want to get into AdMech, this is a great way to do it. It's a ton of models, a ton of minis, ton of units for relatively cheap. So there's, just keep your eye open at your local store if they take used models. If they're selling them, check in every once in a while and see what they have, and maybe you might get lucky and find an army like that that's available to you,
or just a unit that would supplement the army that you want to play.
Yeah, definitely. They will often have people who have gotten out of 40K and they traded in something that, they don't care about it, but it might be the thing that you're looking for. It might be exactly what you need.
One thing to keep in mind is there will be a little upcharge because it is painted and it's ready to play. So hobby stores will charge a little extra for those, but you're still probably saving money in the long run, I would say, because you're paying you're basically paying the value of that unit if you bought it in box, and you're paying the convenience price of not having to get it ready to go yourself. So I don't know if it's necessarily budget friendly, but it might help you like get into it faster. And if you don't like it, maybe you could trade it back to the hobby shop.
Yeah, that's also an option. The other option that I wanted to put out there, at least, is going on eBay and searching for the recent starter box used units, or units that they're selling individually. Like, people will buy. So in this edition, it was the Leviathan box. People would buy that box and they would say, I want only the Space Marines, and then they would sell all the pieces for the Tyranids. And the same can be said for people who are Tyranids players, and they buy that box because it comes with a great deal, even just buying their half, and they'll sell the Space Marine half. This edition, I went and bought all the pieces for the Space Marines from the Leviathan box for probably like half off MSRP because of how cheap they were. And I did it like right at the beginning of when the edition came out.
So a lot of people had the box, basically.
Yeah, there was tons of boxes out there with these. Like in this one, it was like the Infernus Marines. You could get like a unit of 10 for like $25. Like, that's nothing compared to when they come out, they're 10 and it's $60. There was the Dreadnought, the Ballistus Dreadnought, and I think I got mine for like $37 or something like that. It was just insane. Like, there was just a ton of deals that you can go on eBay, especially around the starter box that's out right now, and get units for cheap. There's other deals. People are selling their collection or lot or whatever, and it's another option to find some really good deals.
Mm-hmm. So the next thing that we want to move into is, and I don't know how everybody feels about this, but let's see this slideshow. There we go. 3D printing. So another way that you can do this on a budget is if you already have a 3D printer. I don't recommend doing this if you don't already own a 3D printer, but you could, instead of working with official GW models, which is probably frowned upon. So if you're only planning on playing with your friends at hobby stores, depends on the hobby store too. Don't do this at an official GW store.
And notably, you can't play in any tournaments if you do this.
Yes, but you could 3D print and proxy models. And honestly, you don't even have to 3D print them. So you could proxy army men if you really wanted to, and just glue them to a base that is approximately 40 millimeters or 38 millimeters, depending on what the base size is. Is 38, 35? I don't know.
32,
40, yeah, whatever. I'm not British. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, like, the 3D printing is a great option if you have access to it already. You can find some free or cheap STLs online and print some cheap proxies for whatever army that you want to play. You can go, and if you have like army men and you're really cheap and you just want to glue them to some bases, you can actually find the appropriate sized bases. They're not going to be obviously the GW bases. They're a premium or whatever, but like, you can go on Amazon and you can buy a bag of like 200 bases of whatever size you need for like $10, and then you have a million bases to glue all your proxies to, whether that's your 3D prints or something else that you have on hand. You can glue them to that and just play with that.
Or even better, you could just sticky tack it and save those bases for something better later, or whatever. But yeah, the best experience is going to be if you own a 3D printer. If you want to really engulf yourself in the 40K universe, there are options through various websites to print off very good alternatives to GW models and get the GW experience, the Warhammer experience, without really breaking the bank.
And it's also its own hobby on its own, 3D printing. But if you get into 3D printing, if you already are into 3D printing, it's a great supplement to helping you kit bash your models that you are going to buy eventually if you get into the hobby.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example. I was looking for a jump chaplain, and I don't want to buy the model that's out there, and I'm glad I didn't, because I think he's being replaced in the Blood Angels box that's announced recently. Not to date this episode, but I'm glad I didn't, because it literally just got a refresh, and I didn't want to buy it because it was kind of a Blood Angels mini. So I
Mm-hmm.
had a chaplain from the Indomitus box back from 9th edition, because I've had minis since 9th edition, and we just started in 10th edition. That tells you how early I started buying stuff. I had a chaplain from that box, and I didn't have any use for him because I didn't want to run a chaplain by himself just on foot. So I have a resin 3D printer. I 3D printed a jump pack with some other attachments to make him look like a jump pack jump chaplain.
Mm-hmm.
And now I have a jump chaplain that's made for my Indomitus chaplain, which is cool. You know, that 3D printing side that I've already been into enabled me to make a unit that I would otherwise have to buy another $35, you know, to purchase that specific model.
Yeah, and I would recommend, so like if you're listening to this and you've already thought about getting into 3D printing, I I would recommend getting a resin printer if you want to have more detailed models that are going to look good on the table. Cuz if you're printing with traditional PLA filament, it's just not going to look as crisp unless you have like a really
A really
high-end
expensive one.
printer. And if you do, it's going to take a really long time. So get yourself a resin printer if you want to get into the hobby of 3D printing and you're also interested in wargaming. If you have that overlap, go with a resin printer. Also be careful because you don't
It's
want
toxic.
to yeah, you don't want to breathe in that stuff or
Don't
get it on
touch the
your
resin.
hands. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't breathe in the fumes if possible. Like, have it in a room that's well ventilated.
Mhm.
That sort of thing. If you want terrain, buy a filament 3D printer. Buy something that's not. Don't buy a resin
Yeah.
one unless it's like a really big build plate, which a lot of them have a small, like the affordable. I have an affordable one. I have like the, I don't know, something from like 4 years ago or something, and
Mhm.
it has a pretty small build plate, but it's great for printing, you know, pieces for models. I can build like small walls and other small things. But you have a filament 3D printer, and you've built your own. Well, you bought the STLs, and then you 3D printed the terrain that we use when we play.
Yeah, and that's kind of our next thing that I want to get into is the other piece of the hobby that a lot of people don't think about when they get into it is the terrain that they're going to need to play the game. You can use anything around the house. That's not incorrect. And I also think that Warhammer 40K is probably more accessible to get into because you can play with terrain templates. So this is something that we I've never had it before in any other war games. We didn't have it in Star Wars Legion. We didn't have terrain templates, but you could literally just cut out a terrain template and put whatever you want inside of that template, and you go, "This is a ruin," and it's this cardboard box, but it's a ruin and it's in this area. It's not going to be
Yeah,
super immersive, but it'll work.
you could go, and you know, if you have, you know, Coke cans, or you know, beer cans, or whatever the heck you drink, you know, if you
Empty
have
coffee
bottles,
cans.
yeah, you can use those types of things, and you can set those up as, you know, big like I don't know, tankers and stuff. Like, put them on their side. Now they're tanks, you know. And
There's also
if you,
great 3D prints to enhance like cans to make them look
that's true, yeah.
40K ish.
And if you are into doing like DIY terrain, I would always recommend going and checking out some YouTube channels, because there's a lot of people who do DIY terrain, especially for 40K.
Mm-hmm.
They do awesome jobs with exactly this type of thing, cans and cardboard and stuff like that, to get started in 40K, or any other war game that you want to play for almost nothing, with whatever you have lying around at home.
And you can find stuff for free on like Thingiverse and other websites that host like STLs that you can 3D print. What I would recommend is going to a website where you might have to pay a little bit of money to get like an STL pack. And if you find like there's a specific, once you get into the game and you find there's a specific terrain rule set that you want to play with, whether it's like the GW terrain or if it's the WTC terrain pack. I know there's a UK terrain, UKTC. I don't know what the hell it's called. Whatever. Yeah.
Whatever the British people play, whatever, who cares?
Yeah, so like if you search
most people play the other one is what I'm trying to say. Not to dismiss the UK audience, but a lot of people play the WTC or they play the GW terrain, and a lot of people from what we've seen online, a lot of people prefer the GW terrain or the WTC terrain. Those are great options. We play personally with the GW terrain, I think, right?
Well, we play like a bastardized form of Warhammer
the best
40K
form,
right now.
Honestly.
We have GW terrain layouts with WTC terrain.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's right. You have the WTC terrain, but we play the GW layouts.
I'd like to use WTC terrain layouts, but they're very much like balanced towards light, medium, like heavy terrain types. And
yeah,
we could probably try it sometime. We just haven't done it yet, and it really depends on having a team where you can be like, I want to play on the heavy terrain because I have a horde army that's like wants to get into melee. So I want a lot of terrain to hide. But anyways, we're kind of diverting off of the subject.
DIY terrain.
Yeah, but really, like if you want to do 3D printing, a PLA filament. Like if you have a PLA filament 3D printer, it's going to be great for terrain because you don't need like that high fidelity or high resolution look when you print something off for terrain. It's really a backdrop for your game.
It's functional. It's not going to be the thing that catches everybody's eye.
If it's catching everybody's eye, it's probably distracting to the game. So like, tone it down a bit.
It probably means that you should paint your minis better too. No.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a good way to save money on the hobby. You don't have to have official terrain to play. So like if you really want to play the game and you don't have hardly any money to spend except on the models, you can cut out some terrain templates and say this is my ruin, because that's how pretty much everybody's playing the game right now. They put down a template on like an area template on the mat, and then you put whatever in it that represents the terrain. Sorry, I just hit my mic. But you could, in that sense, you could play with anything, and that can represent your ruins if you want to save money. But a cheap way to get immersive terrain is through 3D printing.
I'll shout out our first bullet point of playing Kill Team first. When I go and play with my friends and I don't have access to Drew's terrain, we play with Octarius terrain. I have a set, and my friend, one of the friend of the channel, Bill, he has an Octarius terrain set, and we will double up our terrain. And we'll put that on our board, and that'll make up our 40K board. We'll have 2 sets of Octarius set that can build out all of the GW terrain sets, basically. And that works perfectly. The walls aren't as tall, obviously. Doesn't really matter if things are ruins, because if you're off the terrain template, then you can't be seen. It blocks line of sight, that sort of thing. But it is an option that if you are already playing a different game and you have terrain from that game, just use that terrain for 40K. Like, you don't have to go out and get 40K specific terrain. You don't have to buy their terrain sets. You don't have to go and figure out what freaking terrain that they're trying to get you to buy. You just play with whatever you have for, if you are in a different game or whatever you have lying around, you just play with that and start playing. And then if you find that you want to buy some more official stuff, or 3D print your own stuff, or commission that to be 3D printed for you, then you can go down that route. Just You don't have to buy any of that terrain though. GW's not going to come to your house and kick down your door like a SWAT team if you start playing with Coke cans instead of their terrain. Just play with whatever you got lying around, cereal boxes, Amazon boxes that you cut up, do that stuff, and then as you go, you can enhance it.
Yeah, if you're like me and you buy the GW models, but then you're 3D printing your own terrain, GW's not going to care. They're going to be happy that you're getting into the hobby, because it's like, even if you're proxying models, you're going to have the itch probably at some point to buy the official GW models, and GW doesn't care because it's the gateway drug into getting into the game.
The only time they care is if you're at their store or in an official tournament and they want
Yes.
you to be marketing the game to everybody that walks by. And if you're marketing not their models, then they're going to have an issue with you. That's the only time that they care, though.
Yeah, but if you're looking to play at home, you want to get started quick, 3D printing to proxy or to fill your table with terrain and still have that immersive experience of I'm playing in a grimdark universe, it's a great way to get started on a budget.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into the next one, Brooke. You want to introduce the next one? It is hobbying, like paint supplies.
Yeah. So what I would personally recommend, so if you are, you bought your starter box or whatever you bought and you want to start getting into painting, you don't need to go and buy the mega box of Army Painter that just came out that has 250 paints and it has all these triad paints and it has every metallic color under the sun and it has, it has these properties and you need every shade of magenta out there. You don't need to buy that box. Just go out and get the core box. Buy the one that comes with like 8 paints and a couple of metallics and a brush. And just start painting. You can mix your paints. You can make colors. They give you all the primary colors. You can mix them and make whatever color you need. Go and buy the core kit. And then as you start painting, you might realize what color scheme that you like. And then you can buy specific paints for your color scheme instead of buying a box of 250 paints and you're going to use 10 of them. Just buy the core kit, get started, figure out what you actually need, and then buy those in particular.
Yeah, I'll add on to this, not to fire shots at anybody or anything like that on YouTube, but you really have to be careful when you're following different hobbying channels, and the hobbying channels are great. Follow them for tips on how to do wet blending, or how can I get a good zenithal and then paint my model, and after I get the base coat, how do I highlight it, and all of that stuff. It's great for that. But a lot of these YouTube channels are sponsored by like Army Warpaint. So they're incentivized to sell you these big bundles of paint that you don't need necessarily, because like Brooke said, for my army, I use like red, green, gray, 2 different browns, a metallic and a bronze, like a bronze-ish color, a copper color, like, and that's the bulk of everything I paint, and black and white basically.
Yeah, I mean, you'll go online and you're like, oh, I need to find a color scheme that I like, and you'll be searching all the YouTube channels, all the hobby channels, or maybe you go on like some website that has some painting recipe, and you're like, oh, how'd they get that color? And then they list their specific paints of a specific brand because maybe they're incentivized to push that brand or whatever. Maybe they have like, not even that. They could be like, oh, I have this color from this brand, and then I have this color from this brand. You don't necessarily need the same exact color to get the same kind of result. You can go in and use your core paint kit and probably get the same exact result by making your red, but not the red that they were pushing. Just go and if there is a recipe, if somebody's like, oh, if you want to paint Blood Angels red, Blood Angels Space Marines, you have to buy these paints. And then you go out and you make all these purchases and maybe you realize, oh, I effing hate painting with these specific paints, but for whatever reason they get good results with them because they painted one model, and now here you are painting a dozen models at a time. You're painting a bunch of models and they just painted up one Space Marine. You're like, oh, that looks really good, and then you realize you hate painting with that paint. It's a huge mistake. Just get started with what you like, you'll realize what colors you actually need. And don't get me wrong, you can follow a recipe. Like following a recipe is good for starters, people who don't understand, how to get certain results from the paints that are in front of them. It obviously takes some know-how to manipulate a core set of paint to get the colors you want. So following a recipe can be very helpful. I totally get that. But if you do have a little bit of know-how on how to mix your paints, or if you are willing to do some research on how to get certain results, you can make pretty much any of those results with the core set of paints that you would get from like an army painter or whatever. You could go to Pro Acryl or whatever. Like you just buy their core set of paints, you can get pretty much anything that you would need.
Another thing to be aware of are brushes. So that's something that's going to be pushed a lot on other YouTube channels, is buy this specific brush because you'll become a better painter. Because if you're new to the hobby, I guarantee you the brush isn't going to make you a better painter. It's the time that you spend gaining experience painting that's going to make you a better painter. It doesn't matter what the tool is, because the person using the tool is the most important part. So if you bought that $200 magnum opus artist dry brushing brush, it's not going to make you better at dry brushing. You could buy makeup brushes and learn to learn to dry brush with those. Save your money.
Okay, I'm guilty of buying hobby supplies that I don't need. I have the Magnum Opus or Artist Opus or whatever. I have the Artist Opus dry brush set, and I bought that because I didn't know of anything else on the market that I could use. And then I learned about makeup brushes, and I was like, oh wow, makeup brushes are pretty good actually. I will say, if you buy the really nice brushes, in this case, dry brushes. I'll talk about dry brushes first. Those Artist Opus dry brushes are
great.
very nice. They're
I've used
great.
yours.
Yeah, they're really nice, but
you don't need it.
I actually bought another set from Amazon that basically looks exactly like the Artist Opus set of dry brushes off of Amazon, and they work exactly the same almost. They're maybe like slightly worse, but like you wouldn't ever notice it if you're using them. And I put that in my travel case. So then I have my Artist Opus set at home. And then if I'm traveling somewhere to hobby, then I'll throw the travel kit in there. Then they're not going to get messed up in the case and all that jazz. So actually most of the time I end up using the ones that I bought for cheaper. So you can find things that you need. So dry brushes are one thing. And I would say that the nice dry brushes are very nice. Like if you really want to spend the money, it's your money, spend it however you want. They're nice and possibly worth it. I don't know if they're worth the wooden box that they come in, but they're worth it to get like a nice dry brush set. However, there's a big asterisk here. I have also bought a bunch of regular brushes from various manufacturers to try them and to figure out what I liked. When I first got in, I got the Kolinsky brushes. Those like really nice actual hair brushes.
Yeah,
and I used one of those
hair brushes or whatever they're called.
I used one of those for a very long time, and I kept it nice with cleaning it with the conditioner stuff that comes they can buy, or comes with certain sets of brushes.
Yeah, buy conditioner. You can make any brush be in good condition for a long time if you keep it conditioned. But go on.
So I bought that brush, and I really liked it. But then eventually it died on me because I was painting a ton of Star Wars Legion at the time. And I then moved on to looking at other options. I bought like a synthetic set, and then I bought like some random set on Amazon. And then this goes to your point that you said earlier. I bought one of the YouTuber content creator brush sets. I will not name names, but I bought one because they were effectively a replacement for the Sable Kolinsky brushes, and I was like, yes, like this is what I need, because I loved that brush when I had it, and I didn't want to spend a bunch of money to buy another one. So I was like, I'll get this combo set that, it's a little bit more expensive, but it comes with like a bunch of different sizes, and I hate that set. I hate it. It's unusable for me. I don't know why I can't use them, but I literally can't use them. Maybe I'm dumb. Maybe I suck at painting. I hate them. I can't use them.
You got to get on that YouTuber's level. That's all.
I guess. I never will ever claim to be like a good painter. I couldn't do it. And then I tried another set from another it was another YouTuber content creator. It was another like they kind of sponsored the uh I don't know. They were on the brush. Their name was on the brush basically.
Mhm.
So I tried theirs, and it was a good one. It was fine. But then shortly down the road, the hair or it was actually a synthetic brush. It started just coming out of the ferrule. Like the hairs just
Mm,
started falling out. I'm like, well
that's
now
the
I don't have a
worst.
brush anymore. So then I I bought I bought the Army Painter speed paints, and it came with that little cheap red synthetic brush.
Crappy army war painter brush. Yeah, I know
Turns
exactly what you're
out
talking about.
Turns out that's my favorite brush. I'm not
Wow.
even kidding. I use that almost exclusively unless I'm doing something that's like that requires a lot of detail work, like something that needs a finer point. I actually use that Army Painter stupid brush that comes in those stupid kits, I use that more than anything else right now. And
Mhm.
I've used a ton of stuff, and I've used the Sable Hair Kolinsky BS brush. I've done that.
Mhm.
But I default to this little Army Painter brush. I don't know.
Synthetic, crappy, cheap brush.
Yeah. So like moral of the story is don't waste your time trying to buy the like awesome brushes. Just if
Yeah.
you bought a starter kit, if you bought the core box of the Army Painter kit, and it came with that stupid brush, don't just immediately throw it in the garbage because if you're I don't know, maybe you're like me and you are a simpleton and maybe that brush just speaks to you like it did to me and I don't know, it just works for me.
Well, yeah,
And
don't look for a golden bullet to make hobbying
yeah,
easier for you because there's no brush that's going to make all of a sudden I can paint really well because that's just not how it works. And
yes.
don't blow your money in that department because it's a quick way to waste your money that you could be using elsewhere to buy miniatures, or if you want to buy official terrain, it doesn't have to be official terrain or just other terrain that you didn't have to 3D print. You can use your money elsewhere instead of wasting it in things that honestly to me are a big waste of money. Don't buy really fancy brushes because until you are at the level of being a painter that those other YouTubers are, you don't need those brushes. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I still don't
And
need those brushes.
and if you're like me and you don't know how to properly take care of your brushes, you're going to be upset when that really expensive brush that you bought because it was in a YouTuber's hand and you're like, "Wow, that's a really nice mini. I need to buy that exact brush." And then you get it and you're like, "Wow, it has a really sharp tip." And then you paint with it 3 times and then
You
suddenly
ruin it.
all the bristles are going every direction. You're like, "I can't get it into a tip anymore." And then you don't understand how to fix it. Like me,
Yeah.
uh, then you don't waste your money
Mm-hmm.
on a brush that is $25 per brush. You now wasted your money on a brush that was like $3
Yep.
or free if it came with the core set of paints.
Yeah. Learning brush care with a disposable synthetic brush is gonna put you a lot further along in the hobby than if you spent, $100 on a fine real hair sable hair brush and then you ruin it and you're like, I can't afford cheap brushes right now because I spent so much money on this brush. I'm gonna wait a month. And then maybe that month goes by and you're just not that into the hobby anymore. So um don't put yourself back on the wrong foot by wasting money on an area that isn't important when you're first getting into this hobby and you're being budget conscious of, I don't want to spend too much money, but I want to try this thing out, or I want to get into this hobby. Spend your money wisely.
Yeah, and I think you said it best earlier, and that is develop your skill, not your debt because you spent too much money on some tool that you don't know how to use. Like, develop your skill and then move on from there. Like, I recognize that this little crappy army painter brush that I use all the time isn't good enough to do very small details. So I do have a small brush that is also a synthetic. I'll point out it's a synthetic brush that is a smaller brush that I can do detail work on. So develop your skills and then go from there. If you really want to get a nice brush, then spend some money on a nice brush if you really want to, but start small. Start with that synthetic brush that just came free with the core set of rules.
Mhm.
But let's move on to the next one. And I think that this is kind of appropriate from our last episode, actually. You should find a group or a community, and whether that's people at your local game store, or if you have some friends who are already into the hobby, or maybe you are working at work and you have some coworker who's like, oh yeah, I play 40K, and you start a little conversation there. But if you can find a group or community, more often than not, the people who play 40K want more people to play 40K. So they are going to be more than happy to let you borrow the models that they have so you can try the game. And if you're on a budget, this is a perfect way to get in the door. You can start playing, see if you even like it before you spend $1. You can go in, have a friend or community, go to your local game store. They probably have demo games. If they have a lot of 40K stuff, they probably have a 40K night, where you can show up and people are playing 40K. You could get involved in that. But if you have a group they will let you borrow so that you can try or play the game and participate. And then as your budget expands, you can start investing in the armies that you like to play after you've tried them. It saves you the time of wasting money on something that you didn't enjoy, so that you can then invest wisely and buy the things that you enjoyed, rather than things that you think you will enjoy and then it turns out you don't.
Yeah, maybe this should have been before our first tip or even our second tip, but
Yeah.
it's like if you find some good friends who are already into this hobby, there is a chance that they already have a second army. And if you have multiple friends, there may be multiple options too. So you could try one of those armies out, and you could find out if you like that faction. So you could very quickly find a faction that you want to collect. Find something you want to collect. And second of all, like we said with Kill Team, it's a good, well, Kill Team's more hobbying, but with Combat Patrol, if you get into that and you try small scale Warhammer 40K, if you have a friend that loans you an army, this is a really quick way for you to try the game out and see if you even like the mechanics of the game. Because honestly, if you don't enjoy playing the game, the hobbying and all of the other parts of the game, which me and Brooke both love, that's part of the reason why we love doing this hobby so much. If you don't even like the game, you probably don't want to invest all that time hobbying to get into something that you're like, I really kind of half-ass enjoy this. Like, why would you want to spend hours and hours getting into something if you aren't really enjoying it? So if you have any way to test the game out before you invest money into it, or a large sum of money into it, do it. Don't waste your time, don't waste your money. Our lives are short. Don't waste your time doing something that you're gonna hate.
I want to put a disclaimer here before we get into our last point. And we are basically talking about this from the perspective of somebody who wants to play the game, and they want to get their foot into playing, like their foot in the door into playing the game. If you are interested in the hobby aspect and you don't necessarily want to play the game initially, if you get into it from a hobby side and you just start buying stuff that you enjoy, maybe it's a faction that you like and you're like, oh, I want to paint demons. Demons are a great option because they have a lot of cool models from like Age of Sigmar. Or maybe you're like, I really like Death Guard. They have Mortarion, and Mortarion is a really cool model, and I want to paint Mortarion. If you go into it from like a hobby side, you might buy random kits and then just happen upon, oh, I have an army. I can play 40K now just because I've bought enough stuff, or I'm like a kit away from having like 1,000-point force. I can go ahead and play.
Mm-hmm.
I can speak from experience on this. I actually bought into Star Wars Legion. That was the first game that I bought into. I bought into Star Wars Legion with literally nobody to play with because I liked the models so much. And like they're not amazing models, but I like Star Wars. And so I wanted to paint Star Wars stuff. And I thought it was cool. And I figured if at the very least, I could set up a board and I could have 2 factions and I could play a game, like a solo game by myself. This was during 2020 when, everybody thought they would never see another person in their entire lives again. So I was, thinking, well, if wargaming has to be with me only, then I have an option here where I'll have 2 armies and I'll play against myself. Hooray.
Mm-hmm.
But if you, if like, I ended up buying into Star Wars Legion to hobby. And then I just sat down one day and I'm like, oh, I have enough to make 2 armies. I will play a game. And then I played it and turned out I loved playing the game just as much as hobbying. So again, disclaimer, if you want to go into it from the hobby aspect, that is a perfectly reasonable way to do it. And that kind of helps your budget because you will buy the thing that you want to paint and then paint it. And then you'll go and buy the next thing you want to paint. You're not going to buy a combo box of models that you're not going to use because you're going to paint the stuff that you think looks cool.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this in past podcasts, but definitely like the rule of cool, that should always be number one. If you don't enjoy what you're painting, then you're wasting your time.
Yeah, for sure.
But again, like with the game group, you not only can you maybe borrow something secondhand, but it gives you a good way to spend your money in a way where it doesn't feel like you're wasting your money, I guess. Especially around like the holidays and stuff. If you have a close game group, you can turn it into a Christmas tradition or something like that, where you each buy each other like a new unit that they don't previously own, whether for the faction they're currently collecting, or maybe it's a faction that they're thinking about getting into. But it's a good way to expand your army, and it's just like, I'm not saying be a tight ass and use your friends to like get gifts from them or something like that, but like honestly it's a fun way to have that hobby group, is like have a tradition of like, oh, it's so and so's birthday, we're all going to buy him a unit. Like if you had something like that, and you're like spending your money, you're not just spending your money towards the hobby that you want to get into, but you're spending, in this case, you're spending money towards a friend and a friendship and a group and stuff like that, and the camaraderie. It's is where it becomes larger than just the hobby. You're building friendships, and that stuff sticks with you outside of just the game. And that's something that for me is like, that is easier to spend money on than it is if I'm just selfishly spending money. And selfish might be too harsh of a word, but money on myself to play a hobby.
And I think the other part of it, like, I guess we can put a pin in this, I guess, but with the community part, if you go to your local store, a lot of times local stores will be running promos, and they will give you a free model to paint up in the store. Typically, like they'll be like, oh, here's our like promo Space Marine, and they'll give you a Space Marine and you can paint it, like build. They sometimes will make you build paint in the store, but you can go to a store, they'll give you a promo model and you try that and you just paint that one model. And suddenly you're like, oh, this is kind of cool actually, like painting and doing the hobby part. I built it, I painted it, now I have this guy that I can use for my army. That actually happened with one of our friends. He has a Salamanders army and he has Infernus Marines, and he ended up I actually ended up getting him 10 Infernus Marines, and he had this extra one. So we actually converted the sergeant in his Infernus squad into Adrax. So he doesn't have to buy Adrax now. Because he went into the store and he got this free promo, and now he doesn't have to spend $35 in getting Adrax for the Salamanders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if you have if you have a group that is already in this hobby before you get into it, they're just going to be a great resource for you to lean onto.
Yes.
They can steer you away from bad investments. Maybe they'll say, 10th edition, I know you really like AdMech. They're really cool, but they've turned them into a bit of a horde army for 10th edition. You might not want to get into them because they were expensive before. And now if you want to play them at 2,000 point, it's even more expensive. So
Just
just
the beginning
advice.
of the podcast when we said $2,000 because they I think are unironically like $2,000 to play like 2,000 points.
It might be even more than that. Who knows? But
yeah,
a game group is great. A great rock for you to lean on to help you get into the hobby, because not only will they help you make good investment decisions, but they'll also keep you motivated. Which if you need motivation to keep hobbying and stuff, listen to our previous episode. We give lots of good advice on how to avoid hobby fatigue and stuff like that.
So our last topic.
Yeah.
So the last thing that we would suggest is having patience in planning your purchases. You want to avoid the impulse purchases of, the latest thing that was released on the Warhammer community page, and they're advertising this latest box that's coming out, and you are very excited because your faction that you're excited about is one of the factions that's getting a new box, and you're very excited for that. Don't impulsively buy those things. Try to not add those things to your cart on Amazon and accidentally buy them,
have a disciplined trigger finger on your purchases. Like, it's when you're on that add to cart, or if you've made it past that point, you're viewing your cart and you're hitting complete this purchase. Card information. Yeah, I'm ready. Have some trigger discipline. Don't pull the trigger, because if you're still in the middle of hobbying something, you're probably wasting your money because you're not ready for it yet. Wait until you finish the unit you're working on. We talked about this in the last hobby. Let's limit our pile of shame, because then when you read the Reddit discussions where people are discussing their piles of shame, you won't be one of those people going, yeah, I got a big pile of shame too. You'll be like, you know what? I've kept my life in order. I'm a wise spender. I haven't wasted my money like you fools.
Intervention. I feel personally attacked.
Well, I mean,
are my other friends going to join the Discord call and they're going to be like, well, "Okay, we brought you here, Brooke."
I can't afford to have a pile of shame personally, so you are hurting less by having a pile of shame. We'll say that.
Yeah, I have a silly pile of shame. I will say that. I feel like I can't speak to this one as well because I didn't do this because I'm an idiot.
Well, here's another piece of advice. When we say to have patience, I think another word that goes with patience is planning. So really plan out what you want to do with your army. So I think we talked about this with Bill when he was on the episode with us, interviewing him.
Yep.
He mentioned how it can be overwhelming when you look at the entire game and you have all of these different factions you can choose from, and you start focusing on all of these different factions, and it becomes overwhelming to start the game. I think the same thing applies to your army. If your army already has a codex, you might have 5 different detachments or more that you can play with. I would plan out what you want to do in your army. If you've already decided, like me, that you want to do orcs, well, what part of orcs do you want to do? Do you want to do bully boys? Do you want to do speed wad? Do you want to do dread mob? Pick which detachment you want to focus on, because you're going to save money in the long run, and you're not going to pick up. And that's when when your trigger finger is hovering over the left mouse button, and you're like, I'm playing speed wad. Do I need this Death Dread? Probably not. I'm going to remove this from my cart and save for later.
Never.
Or save for never. Maybe you're never going to do Dread Mob in this edition, and let's wait until 11th edition and see if it sucks in 11th edition. Maybe I don't want to waste my money, or maybe it's going to be removed from the game in 11th edition. So
Yeah. I,
just plan out your approach to getting into the game, because you're going to save money by having an idea of exactly what you want to do, and you're going to invest your money more wisely by making more informed decisions on your purchases.
and if you're in my position, I will give you some advice. The planning part is particularly helpful because in the current edition, and right now we're in 10th, if you look at what you want to run and you try to decipher exactly how you want to run your army that you bought a lot of because you have a ridiculous pile of shame, and if you are thinking about buying that next model, plan your army, plan what you actually want to run. If you have a list that you built and you're like, okay, I'm going to play this and I want to check now in my pile of shame if I have all of that. And you're like, oh yeah, turns out I do. Or you don't have something, but then you're like, well, okay, I have I have a unit that's like a unit that I need in this list. Like, I'll give you an example. I was building a list and I was like, "Oh, I would like to have a Predator, which is a treaded tank, not the hover tank." And I was like, "Well, I already have a Gladiator though, and it's 30 points more. I'm just going to find 30 points and put a Gladiator in instead of a Predator." So, me planning out my army now tells me to not go out and buy a Predator impulsively because I want to run it for a game. I'm going to hobby what I have instead because it fits the playstyle I want to play with, which is I need something anti-tank in my list. So I'm gonna run a Gladiator, or a Predator would also be good, but I'm gonna plan for that so I don't go out and make that impulse buy. I'm gonna check my pile of shame and I'm gonna see what I already have. And if I have something that can fit a similar role to something that I don't have and I can avoid buying that thing, then I probably will.
Mm-hmm. And the thing that I want to also not discourage by talking about planning and having patience, if you've gotten yourself to the point in the game where you've played 3 or 4 games of 1,000 point or 2,000 point, and you kind of have you feel like you've gotten everything you need for a specific detachment, that's the point in time when you can be like, I really want to try out. You want to try out the Predator at some point in time. You're like, I think I'm ready to try out the Predator. After you've kind of exhausted what you have or what your
Which will never
detachment,
happen.
yeah. Well,
Anyways, go ahead, sorry.
maybe for Space Wolves, we'll say once you've exhausted what you have for
Fair.
Space Wolves, and you're like, I want to try out some other stuff. That's the point in time when you can buy a one off of a different model. And I actually encourage that if you want to get into this game long term, and this would go more into the meta and not the subject of this episode, but it's good to have a diverse list of units that you can play with, because the meta of this game is always changing. And if you go too hard into one thing, you're going to be very disappointed when that thing is no longer meta. So, if you have one Predator, one, I don't know, Space Marines
Gladiator.
units, one Gladiator. Yeah. If you got one of a bunch of different things, then you're ready to adjust for whatever the meta is when 10th is updated with new rules, or we move over to 11th edition. 11th edition has a whole new rule set, and a different unit is good now. So,
Yeah.
At that point in time, it's good, because that investment, after you've done the initial investment, if you've already spent $1,000 on building your army, that $50 purchase to get a specific vehicle doesn't hurt as bad. At that point in time, it doesn't feel like a hit on your budget. And when you've planned it out longer, you know what they say, time is money, and if you've spread out the time more, then that impact is a lot less.
Yeah. And I think, to your point about the meta, if you're on a budget, never chase the meta. Like, you're going to buy too many things that you will use once and then you won't use them again. Just forget about the meta if you're on a budget and buy the things that you want to play or things that are budget friendly, like things that come in combat patrols or starter boxes. Just avoid chasing the meta and buying, like, I'll tell you in 10th, it seems like the meta for anti-tank is to run like 3 gladiator lancers or something, like run 3 of those. Well, that kit's like $75. That's crazy. That's if I'm going to run 3 gladiators, I could instead take that $150 that I would need to buy 2 of them, and I could buy a combat patrol for a new army if I really wanted to. I could buy a combat patrol and play a totally different army now. So don't chase the meta. If you're on a budget and you want to get the most out of your money, there's better things you can buy besides the latest meta.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. So that's pretty much all of the tips we have for you all today. So if there's anything we left out that you can think of for other listeners that might be good tips to play Warhammer 40K without breaking the bank, leave a comment and let other listeners know what they can do to save some money.
Yeah, we're hoping to, on some of these tips and tricks videos, to build a bit of a repository of information, and that starts with you guys also in the comments. We have our video, obviously, that we're putting out here, but if you have things that you think are important to share, leave them in the comments. And we've actually had a lot more engagement recently, and we appreciate all the comments that people are leaving, and we appreciate the interactions that we see. So if you have something that you'd like to share, we would love to see it.
Yep. Yeah, we love the interaction with everybody, and we're getting some really cool interactions from everybody. It's been very encouraging. So we love hearing from you all. So don't be shy. Drop a comment, even if it's just saying like we liked it, like this episode. We love that. We love that too. So that makes us feel like we didn't waste our time doing this for you all. So
you can go to sleep at night. It's nice and sound in sleep, after seeing a good comment from that nice guy.
And it honestly, if you disliked anything we talked about and you have feedback for us, we would love to hear it as well, because we've gotten dislikes and we got no feedback as far as like what somebody didn't like. So if you didn't like something, leave a comment. Tell us what you didn't like. We want to hear it so we can improve. And then we'll ban you from the... No, I'm kidding.
We'll ban you for life from ever commenting ever again on anything. My dad works at YouTube.
Yeah. No, honestly, we want to hear back. So, like, when we get dislikes, it's nice to hear, like, hey, can you do this instead? Like, your audio sucks. And we've tried to improve our audio this week, and we haven't gotten a comment, actually, that says our audio sucks. But we want to improve it before we get a comment that says your audio sucks.
Yeah, if you guys have any feedback, please leave it below. Leave a like and a comment, and we'll be happy to interact with you guys moving forward on other videos as well.
Yep. Yeah, we hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and if you're still listening and you aren't a subscriber, go ahead and hit that subscribe button now and hit the notification bell so you can be informed of any future episodes or our clips or shorts as they're coming out. We're trying to do a whole shorts series that is going to quickly explain it's targeting new Warhammer 40K 10th edition players to get them into the game, hopefully in less than, I don't know, what do you think, 7 minutes, Brooke?
It'll probably be less than 10 minutes by the time we're all done with all the phases and other things that we think are important.
Yep, we recently did one that was going crazy with the YouTube algorithm, and one of you in our community, which we very much appreciated, corrected us that we were wrong in our video. And we want to produce useful and, most importantly, correct information for you all to use. And we immediately took that video down, even though it was crushing it in the algorithm. We were getting tons of subscriptions. Maybe it was stupid for us to do that because we were getting so much traction from this short, but to us, it didn't feel morally right to have a video up there that was wrong. So it
was spreading information that was incorrect. It wasn't necessarily anything I said, but so go check out the shooting phase short if you haven't.
Yeah.
You might have seen the old version. I updated it, but in the video, I had the intercessors shooting with their bolt rifle and their pistols.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I learned after someone had commented, and thank you for that person that commented, because this is something I didn't know. So we're new, and we've been documenting our journey through 40K, and I never knew this as a new player. You can't shoot pistols alongside other ranged weapons during the shooting phase. You have to choose one or the other, basically, and unless it's a monster or a vehicle. And I showed in the video that they were shooting with the pistols, and that was wrong. And when I realized that, I was like, oh no, I'm going to spread this to everybody else that is like me, who didn't see the pistol keyword and then read the pistol keyword, all that, because that information only lives on the pistol keyword. If you don't realize that, then you're going to do exactly what I did. And I don't want people to do what I did. We want to spread out this information that's correct. And if you guys catch things that we do incorrect, then we're happy to correct them, even though the algorithm kind of punished us. So if you're listening to this long, go check out that short. We put a lot of work into these shorts. They're actually a lot more work than what these videos are. They're trying to get everything right and trying to get the right information in it and cutting down the script and all this stuff. It takes a lot of work to put into these videos, or into those shorts. If you guys can go check out those shorts, go check out the shooting phase short that is now kind of hidden behind the algorithm after the first one. Go check those out. Leave a like, if you find them useful, and we will get, as we move forward, we're going to have a playlist that is specifically targeting new players that will have all these shorts that can get them up to speed quickly.
Yep. And to shout out the specific users that helped us out, the viewers, Jonathan Co 5471, he pointed out one issue where we needed to check out the FAQ. We appreciate that. And then the other user was Gyarados1, so he pointed out the pistols issue. So thank you to those users for interacting with us and correcting us in our previous short. We definitely appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely. Even though we got punished, we do appreciate it.
Yeah.
And we just want to spread the right information. And if you guys find it helpful, we're glad. We're happy, because we're learning stuff as we make these shorts too, and it's useful to us too.
Yep. And if you have any friends that are interested in 40K, we'd appreciate it if you shared our content, because again, like in instances like this, we're kind of getting punished because we uploaded the same video 2 times in a row. And the first one did great. The second one isn't doing anything because it's basically a copy of the first one, and we would rather, like we said, we'd rather share correct information than go big or something like that. So that's not what this channel's intended to do. We want to share our experience of playing the game, as well as giving you guys good, useful information. We don't want to waste your time.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, so sorry for the little bit of the sermon there at the end, but
tangent. Oh well.
Long story short, check out our shorts, check out our clips channel, or I guess is our clips playlist, and subscribe if you haven't already. And we appreciate every single one of our listeners, and any of our new subscribers. Welcome to the channel, and we're happy to have you.
Absolutely. If you like what we do here, again, leave a sub, leave a comment, leave a like, and we'll be in touch.
All right, talk to y'all later.
Bye, guys.